shadows of a broken night, she walks alone beneath the fading light. Memories haunt her, cold and clear, whispers of a childhood drowned in fear. A teddy bear clutched in trembling hands, gunfire roaring across the land. She walks through the darkness, eyes full of tears. Discover her family silenced by years. Dead father, mother, little brothers cry. Lost in the silence, a last goodbye. Trauma scars carved deep in her soul, a heart frozen, no longer whole. Oh, Morel, cry for the lost, bear the weight of the heavy cost. In the ashes of her pain she fights for vengeance. In the endless night, tears fall like rain on a broken world. Her scars are stories left untold and unfurled. Demons weep in hell's despair for the pain she bears. So pure, so rare, from the depths of her past she rises cold. A story of sorrow, a truth untold. Kerika's words, a trembling plea. I'm sorry, tears she can't see. A bond shattered, a love deferred, her heart guards silent and unheard. She seeks the truth no matter the cost, a life built on pain and what's lost. Her mind replaying a ghostly scene, a girl with a teddy caught in between. Gunshots echo, a life torn apart, a childhood robbed, a broken heart. Only real cry for the lost, bear the weight of the heavy cost. In the ashes of her pain she fights for vengeance. In the endless night, tears fall like rain on a broken world. Her scars are stories left untold and unfurled. Demons weep in hell's despair for the pain she bears. So pure, so rare, and in her silence a voice still cries. A hope that through the darkness love still finds. But the past shadow, relentless and deep, keeps her chained in sorrow's sleep. Kerika's apology, a fragile light in her storm of endless night. A plea for forgiveness, a hope to heal, but her wounds run cold, too real. So here she stands, with tears in her eyes, a soul betrayed by silent cries. Vengeance her only guiding star, a girl lost in the scars of who they are.
Today I'm reviewing the 5th episode of Noir, called Les Soldats. On Wikipedia, there is a critic who considers this one of the worst episodes, saying that it's sleep-inducing. One common criticism of the Japanese anime Noir, as someone said on Amazon, is that it's like a lot of dialogue bang bang, a lot of dialogue bang bang. And this episode is very dialogue heavy. I actually was dreading watching this episode for many months when I decided to review this series and do a deep analysis. I thought I would hate it. I even considered doing a comedy video or a rap about how boring and bad this episode is. But I actually really enjoyed it, and I understand why a lot of people are turned off by it. Before I start, I'll say that Mireille doesn't draw a lot of sympathy for me, even though she has a very traumatic past. I realize this because the way she comes off in the episode is cold and has the heart of an Avenger. Another way of saying this is that all of her sadness, crying, and feelings could have really helped the series, and yes, she does show some of this in the series. But most of it happened during her childhood, when Uncle Claude trained her to become a cold-hearted assassin. Honestly, they devoted episodes to showing her transformation from a girl whose parents and brother were killed to a cold, unemotional killer. I think we would care about her more if she was portrayed as more emotionally open, but because she comes off as cold and hard, it may be difficult for the audience to feel sympathy for her. With Kerika, because she has amnesia, all her emotions are reset. So when something hurts her, it feels truly heartbreaking and sad. She comes from a very sensitive, emotional state. Obviously, when you have amnesia, your emotional regulation gets a boost, and that's why I think she is the most charismatic character in this series. With all that said, this episode tries to give a lot of emotional depth to Mireille more than any other episode, but it's unsuccessful. If the show had shown Mireille as heartbroken or with other emotions that make us feel sorry for her, like in the episode A Bouquet of Flowers from Mireille, I think the episode would have been more successful and made her a more charismatic character. That's why I believe viewers don't like this episode. we're not as emotionally invested in Mireille. A lot of the dialogue and events are meant to evoke sympathy for her, but you can't really feel sympathy for a character who doesn't react emotionally to what happened to her, especially when she's partnered with someone who does react emotionally. Another very important aspect of this episode is that it introduces the series' villain, shifting Noir from a slice of life, episodic adventure to a series with an overarching plot. This is a crucial move early on, as it helps get the story rolling. As I mentioned about Cowboy Bebop, each episode features its own adventure, but by the end, the story often spans 2 or 3 episodes. A good series builds towards climax early, instead of dragging out the plot in later episodes. The episode opens with Vanille doing a voiceover, telling Mireille that he wants to meet her. This is very interesting because they don't show him on the phone, which adds an element of mystery about who he is. The scene shows sunlight shimmering through trees, and a car driving down the road. Later, it's revealed that Vanille is in a hurry to tell her something. This opening is very Noir-inspired, focusing on visual details instead of dialogue, like shots of sunlight through trees and open landscapes. This anime is layered with symbolism. When you see the leaves and the sunlight twinkling through them, then cut to a shot of Vanille's car on a wide open hill, it symbolizes the truth coming to light or being exposed. Next, Karika and Mireille arrive at Vanille's place, which is a sign that reads Barbizon. Not knowing what it was, I looked it up. It's a small village 55 kilometers from Paris, France. An interesting coincidence is that Barbizon is known as a location where many artists and painters work, and later in the series, Karika takes up painting. This could be a subtle foreshadowing of the Season of Hell episode. When they arrive at Vanille's home, the front door opens by itself, which I didn't like because that's not very realistic. It feels like something out of The Shining. They go inside, and the walls are painted yellow and red, symbolic colors of caution and danger. Mireille draws her gun and discovers that Vanille, his wife, and their child are dead. The mother is on the floor, protecting her child, as if she spent her last moments shielding him. I should mention that later it said there are 2 children, but in this scene, only one is shown, so that might be a continuity error. This scene causes Mireille to gasp and react emotionally for the first time in the series. Karika says, "We are too late." Mireille scoffs and feels offended by this, though the statement wasn't meant to be disrespectful. After the opening title, which displays the episode's name in Japanese characters, the scene cuts to downtown Paris, looking at the water. Mireille says, "It was my fault. I was reaching out to everyone Dux came into contact with." I really like this tie-in because Dux was a villain in episode 3, so it shows that events from previous episodes matter and follow the story. She continues, "I'm tracking down information, and that's why he was killed." There are a few shots of a boat on yellow water, yellow because of the sunset. It reminds me of a line Mireille says in the next episode. The blood continues to flow, so maybe the boat symbolizes how bloodshed flows through the series. I also need to mention that Mireille has a flashback of discovering her parents' bodies, and that scene is filled with yellow, possibly indicating that yellow is associated with memories, since yellow disappears from the episode later. She then says, "They're trying to kill us. They're trying to kill Noir." This suggests that whoever killed her friends and paid Dux is part of the organization targeting them, possibly the people who know about her family's killers and who took Karika's memories. At this point, I thought the episodes could have been reordered for better continuity. It would start with Maiden Black Hands, where we get to know the main characters. Episode 2 should be Daily Bread, where they have their first mission together. Episode 3 could be The Sound of Waves, further exploring their teamwork. Episode 4 should be Assassination Play, with a blackout shootout against Dux, revealing that some hired Dux and the Belladonna woman to come after them. Then, episode 5 would be Les Soldats, referencing Dux, and including flashbacks from that episode. Episode 6 should be Los Kittens, which has a flashback related to Les Soldats. The order they currently have makes this episode feel out of place, and my suggested order would improve continuity. I also feel that the purpose of this episode is to transition the series from being a slice of life, villain of the week show into one that establishes the main villain, and builds toward the ending. This helps the episodes flow together, and gives the story a clear direction. The show revisits Mireille's conversation with the Belladonna lady, the assassin with hunting knives from episode 3. They repeat the conversation right before the Belladonna lady dies. I think this flashback is meant to add emotional weight, but it feels very repetitive and unnecessary. There are other ways they could have built emotional depth here. One of the biggest criticisms in Noir is that many early episodes rely heavily on flashbacks, which many viewers see as a way to save money. Similar to clip shows in The Simpsons or Family Guy, where old footage is reused to avoid the expense of new animation. The next morning, Karika waters a green plant that Mireille has owned for a very long time. Many people might not know that this plant is a reference to Luc Besson's film Lion, The Professional, which features a young Natalie Portman in her breakthrough role. Mireille says, "Watering plants is fine, but remember, the leaves turn black." This is symbolic, and I think it represents how these characters are eventually going to become hardened or grow darker over time. Another interpretation is that it foreshadows the episode Bouquet of Flowers for Mireille. She continues, talking about how the code name Noir they're using has meaning, but its origin and exact significance are unknown. To recap, in episode 1, Mireille called their partnership Noir without explaining why she chose that name. Then, in episode 3, during a fight with ducks in an abandoned casino, a blue screen appears, spelling out Target Noir letter by letter. Viewers might interpret this as Mireille having the unlucky lottery and choosing a name that caused people to target her, or perhaps she chose it unknowingly and it was preordained, leading others to come after her and Karika. There's also a voiceover while showing a flashback to episode 1, where Karika and Mireille meet at a construction site in Japan. This is nearly the 5th flashback in this episode alone, without even reaching a halfway point. So I understand why critics might consider this the worst episode. After that, another flashback shows Mireille's childhood trauma. Mireille is about to leave home and says, "I'm going to check out some of Vanelle's old huts." Karika, out of breath and carrying a big purse, dashes to the door, and Mireille tells her, "You needn't come." Karika looks at her like a sad little sister being let down, and she stays home. I speculate that Mireille is still upset about what she said earlier, that they're too late. It's unfortunate for the series because they could have explored a dynamic where Mireille is bossy and sees Karika as a little sister, while Karika stands up to her and asserts that they're equals, teammates, not a little sister needing guidance from an older sister. Mireille then arrives at a bar and talks to Vanelle's superior. The old man reveals that Vanel loved his children and always visited him to show respect. He also says he was extremely loyal to the syndicate he worked for. This adds emotional weight. It's also mentioned that he has 2 children, but the flashback only shows one, which is a continuity error. Mireille tells the old man that Vanel was one of the few people she could trust. The old man mentions that a few weeks ago, his first visit to the bar in 2 years, he wasn't sure why he came. Then he remembers that Vanel has a liquor he wants to give Mireille. When she takes a bottle from him, you hear Vanel's voiceover reading the handwritten French text on it. Mireille, to our memories at St. Gallen's Cathedral. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that distilled is misspelled as distilled. I feel like this episode aims to introduce a large mystery element. Mireille now has to decipher clues on the bottle, which is inspired by classic detective and mystery films like The Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart, and Hitchcock movies such as Vertigo, North by Northwest, and Rear Window. I appreciate how the series incorporates mystery across its genres, establishing early on that Noir is not just a drama or action series, but also includes elements of thriller, psychological thriller, mystery, neo-noir, and femme fatale. Early episodes do a good job of setting up these genres, which is important for strong storytelling. As Mireille walks down the street with a bottle, she hears unsettling footsteps. She knows she's being followed, and eventually, she pulls out her gun. The eerie music score, with repetitive motifs lasting several minutes, creates feelings of unease and uncertainty. The ambient sounds make it feel like the characters are dealing with a powerful, omnipotent force, and that's very true of the Soldats. Mireille takes the bottle home. She and Karika study it closely for clues. Mireille reveals she's never been to St. Gallen's Cathedral. At the bottom of the bottle, there's a string of text letters, English words, and some Russian. Some of the letters are outlined with circles and triangles, which seem to be clues. Although it's not explicitly stated, the triangle within the circle can be seen as a reference to the Eye of Providence and Illuminati symbolism. Mireille says, Vanel discovered something so big that it scared him badly enough to hide it in St. Gallen's Cathedral. Then both of them start naming parts of cathedral, the monastery, the chapel, the bell tower, the herb garden. Karika then says the catacomb, and Mireille gasps, having an epiphany. As I watched, I noticed there were about 10 minutes left in the episode. I remembered watching this many years ago, often falling asleep or getting bored, or singing to myself. But this time, I didn't have that feeling. I found the episode somewhat excessive with its flashbacks, but I appreciated what it was trying to accomplish. If you're invested in this series, it's easy to tolerate this episode. If not, it might seem very dialogue-heavy and slow-moving, a slow, drama-like pace. Marielle goes to the catacombs, and there are some very beautiful shots of the nighttime sky, and her passing through the graveyard before descending the steps into the catacombs. One of the graves has belladonna lilies, which is a reference to the 3rd episode. I think it would have been better if they explicitly mentioned the graveyard from the 3rd episode for better continuity. Inside the basement, there are many grave beds with piles of bones on top. She deciphers the code on the bottle, which defines the exact directions of what Vanille left behind for her. I also like that they set the scene in the catacombs because it feels like they're trying to make this anime more adult. Obviously, you can't have scenes like this in children's movies. Additionally, the catacombs add a noir element, as noir films are typically dark and brooding, dealing with themes of death and decay. I also contemplated that the catacombs are foreshadowing of episode 26, where they have the shootout at the manor. A lot of religious followers die in that episode, which takes place at Altina's manor, featuring a church, an outdoor baptism area, and a trial by fire. When you look at the catacomb in episode 5, filled with skeletons, it makes you think of the final episode's setting, after many bodies have decomposed, bones scattered everywhere. This symbolism suggests that the catacombs represent a future scene of death and decay. Marielle approaches one of the burial beds and, under a skeleton, finds an envelope containing a Xerox page from a book. The text is either in Latin or French, and the show subtly hints at this. The reason they include this detail is that she wants to leave quickly, knowing she's being followed. Exactly as she exits the catacomb, a man puts a gun to her head and snatches the envelope from her. She says, "I thought you would be here, and you were after that." He pulls the trigger, but Karika, from the shadows, fires her gun and knocks the man's weapon from his hand. Mireille then says, "Let's start with who you work for." In my notes, I wrote that what I find so jarring about this episode, and why many people don't like it, is because Noir usually carries emotional weight and character exploration. However, this episode primarily focuses on establishing the plot of the entire series, essentially serving as an introduction to the Soldats. It feels very experimental, as they are pushing hard on the mystery elements, but what makes Noir great is that each character undergoes an emotional journey. You are meant to care for them, and that emotional investment carries you through each episode. Without that, the dialogue becomes long-winded and boring. Since this episode is heavily plot-driven, mystery-focused, and dialogue-heavy, it ends up feeling very slow and dull. That's why many viewers struggle with it. There are other anime episodes that feel different from the rest. For example, in the original Naruto series, there's a silly episode where they want to reveal Kakashi's face. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura, who are usually serious characters, act obsessively about finding out what their sensei looks like. It's a motivation that's out of character for them and feels very forced. It's also a high comedy episode, which many viewers disliked. Similarly, in Noir, this episode prioritizes mystery over character development or emotional depth. Another comparable episode is in Dragon Ball Z, where Goku and Piccolo try to learn how to drive. The episodes shift from action to comedy, and is considered one of the best because it establishes that the characters can be humorous. Episodes that deviate from the usual tone, whether for comedy or genre focus, can be successful if they serve a purpose. For example, Naruto's comedic episodes or Dragon Ball Z's humor work because they deepen our understanding of the characters' personalities. In Noir, this episode leans into the mystery genre, and while it's somewhat successful in that regard, also emphasizes that mystery is one of the series' genres. What makes Noir work overall is that you care about the characters in every episode. That emotional connection helps you tolerate slower dialogue or less action. The series' dialogue can be reminiscent of lengthy Russian novels like Crime and Punishment, full of drawn-out conversations. But the payoff is in the character depth and their journeys, which keep viewers invested. When an episode focuses on plot, mystery, or genre shifts like this one, it can feel out of place or slow. But in the larger context, the series builds toward the final episodes, where character development and emotional stakes come to a head. However, this episode lacks a character who truly captures your emotional investment outside of Karika, who is temporarily rejected. Mireille's coldness and lack of sensitivity in this episode make it hard for viewers to connect with her or feel invested in her journey. Another issue is that the Soldat follower is shot at by both Mireille and Karika, but manages to escape into a church. That makes no sense, considering they're supposed to be professional assassins. It's unrealistic for someone trained as a killer to escape so easily in that manner. In the next scene, Mireille enters a church looking for him, and he tries to kill her with a candelabra. That's highly unrealistic. Wouldn't he have a gun, especially since many Soldat members are trained in firearms? Using a lit candelabra as a weapon makes no sense for a professional assassin, and the heat and light from it would draw her attention. It makes a character look desperate and stupid, which doesn't match the calculated, intelligent killers that the Soldats are supposed to be. Another confusing moment is that outside the church, it looks like Karika kills one of the other Soldat members. But there's no clear setup for this, no indication that there are other members nearby. Instead, it would have been better if the episode showed multiple enemies pursuing them, making the gunfire and shootout feel more realistic. As it stands, the gun sequences and action scenes come across as a bit lazy. Back inside the church, Mireille interrogates a Soldat member at gunpoint. He says that the document they're after is more pressure than any life on this planet, meaning he doesn't care if he dies if it means protecting the secret. Mireille asks, "You're the ones who killed Vanille and his family?" He responds, "That was the order given to us. The secret must be maintained." She presses, "Who gave the orders?" He responds cryptically, "They are everywhere. Only a handful of people know they exist. But I know the truth. Shoot me and your key is gone." He smirks, knowing she's thinking about the murder of Vanille family. Mireille has a trauma response, recalling being a little girl 10 years ago and discovering her family's bloody bodies. She then remembers Vanille's family, and in her emotional state, she gives the Soldat a death sentence. He chuckles as she is overwhelmed with emotion, clearly wanting her to kill him so he won't reveal secrets. It also shows the sadism and the fanatic loyalty of the Soldats, almost like brainwashing or religious zeal. What's revealing about Mireille here is that she usually keeps her emotions in check, but in this moment, she acts on her feelings of revenge. Her empathy drives her to kill him, which adds depth to her character. I believe the series explores this weakness of Mireille more and more. Character flaws like this make her more complex and layered. It would have strengthened the series if it shown more her emotional vulnerability earlier, making her more relatable and multidimensional. There's a very cryptic scene that happens next. Karika catches up with Mireille. They both have a stare down for a while. Karika gasps softly, and Mireille's eyes look at the door. Karika then exits the catacombs. When I was younger, I thought this meant Mireille was being bossy or cold. just like when she told Karika to stay at home. My other theory was that the animators had them stand around to waste time. However, my current interpretation is that this is a significant emotional moment for Mireille. She's just telling Karika through facial expressions, "Let me be," because his death means a lot to her, and she needs her privacy to process it. I'm not sure why Karika gasped. There are two possible theories. One is that she feels Mireille is still upset with her and wants to apologize, but she realizes that sometimes saying sorry can make things worse. The other theory is that because Karika has past memories, it has triggered an emotional or trauma response, and she needs some alone time to cope. The next day at home, Mireille reads the Xerox document, and one of the lines translates to "Soldats are the truth." This confirms that Les Soldats are the main villains and antagonists of the series. It provides the series with a clear sense of direction and sets up the final conflict. As Karika waters a flower again, Mireille tells her that her parents were killed, and she has no idea why. She also mentions that she never saw or heard the melody from her watch until she came into contact with Karika. Karika responds, I am sorry, Mireille." Mireille replies, "I will open the door to the past." The scene is drawn out, emphasizing the emotional weight of the moment. It's slow-paced, but it feels necessary because it matters to the characters. The final shot is a close-up of the Xerox text reading Les Soldats. Overall, this isn't a bad episode. It establishes the villain of the series and provides some much-needed context. As I mentioned, it's harder to care about Mireille because she doesn't show much emotional vulnerability in this episode. However, the series has previously focused on her crying over her parents' death as a child and how she transformed from a sad girl into a cold-hearted assassin under Uncle Claude's tutelage. More emotionally powerful episodes exploring her trauma and growth could have made this episode stand out even more. Regarding Karika, the audience cares much more about her because her amnesia resets her ability to cope with her life as an assassin, bringing her pain and heartbreak to the surface. As I've said, the thriller genre is most effective when it features characters that we care about, people who are emotionally vulnerable, like ordinary individuals grieving a family member or facing personal tragedy. In my opinion, episodes 8 and 9, where they discuss the Italian mafia, are the worst of the series. Mireille becomes petrified of someone, then loses that emotion in those episodes. It feels like a weakness introduced suddenly, without proper build-up, which makes it seem fake. Also, the Italian mafia storyline requires more fleshed-out, developed characters, which I feel the series overlooked. Episode 5, Les Soldats, succeeds in its purpose, adding mystery elements, making an effort for the audience to care about Mireille's character, and setting up the main villain and overarching plot. This helps prevent the story from feeling rushed at the end, similar to how Cowboy Bebop structured its narrative.